HOA, Karen injected my disabled daughter with a poisonous syringe. Seconds later, she collapsed herself. Her scream tore through the neighborhood like a siren, sharp, terrified, and unforgettable. I dropped the grocery bag, sprinting toward my disabled daughter as I saw HOA Karen, our so-called community president, holding a syringe, her hand trembling, her eyes cold. In one horrifying second, she plunged it into my daughter's arm. My world froze. My little girl gasped, her body going limp, her wheelchair tipping sideways. But before I could even reach her, Karen's smirk vanished. Her pupils dilated, her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the pavement beside her victim. The same syringe she'd used to hurt my daughter had somehow turned on her. Neighbors screamed. Phones came out. Sirens echoed in the distance. And as I held my daughter's shaking hand, one thought burned in my mind. What kind of monster does this, and how did her own poison end up inside her? Hey, everyone, before we begin, tell me, what city are you watching from right now? Drop your city's name down below in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories reach. And if you believe justice always finds its way back, hit that subscribe button and let's begin this unbelievable story. I never thought moving into a quiet suburban neighborhood could turn into the worst nightmare of my life. My name's Daniel Parker, and I'm a single father raising my 12-year-old daughter, Emily. She's bright, brave, and lives with a disability that's never stopped her from smiling until we met her. Bethany Karen Wilmore, the president of our homeowners association. At first, she seemed harmless, a middle-aged woman obsessed with lawns, noise rules, and HOA forms. But behind that polished smile, there was something darker. She hated seeing my daughter's wheelchair on the sidewalk. She hated hearing laughter from our house. And she made it clear we didn't fit in. It started with complaints, then threats, then strange notes left under her door. But none of that prepared me for the day she decided to cross the line, the day she injected my daughter with poison. What she didn't know was that karma had been watching. It started small, so small that, at first, I brushed it off as neighborhood tension. After all, every community has one person who loves rules a little too much. But with Karen, it wasn't about rules. It was about power. The very first week after we moved in, she knocked on my door with that tight, forced smile. "Mr. Parker," she said, her voice sugary sweet, but her eyes sharp, "your daughter's wheelchair has left marks on the community sidewalk. I'll need you to clean that up immediately. It violates Section 4B of the HOA appearance policy." I remember standing there, stunned. Marks? My daughter's wheelchair had rolled over concrete, that's all. But before I could answer, she leaned in and whispered, "We try to keep this neighborhood looking healthy." Then she glanced toward Emily, who was sitting on the porch, coloring in her sketchbook. My stomach tightened. Over the next few days, the letters started appearing. Neatly typed, signed HOA enforcement. One complained about unauthorized decorations, Emily's chalk drawings on the driveway. Another warned about noise violations, the sound of her wheelchair ramps clanking when she came home from school. I could feel the hostility growing like poison seeping under the door. I tried to ignore it. I told myself Karen was just one of those people who needed control to feel important. But one evening, as I pushed Emily's chair up the driveway, we heard Karen's voice from her open window. Maybe if some people took better care of their children, they wouldn't need special treatment. Emily froze. Her hand gripped mine tighter. That was the night I realized this wasn't about rules. It was personal. The next morning, someone had poured dish soap down our ramp. When Emily tried to wheel herself out to the mailbox, she slipped, nearly falling. I caught her just in time. The soap smelled like lavender, Karen's signature cleaning scent. I took it to the HOA board, but they brushed me off. "Bethany's been president for 5 years," they said. "She knows what she's doing." Of course she did. She knew exactly how to humiliate us while staying within the rules. Then came the neighborhood meeting. I'll never forget it. Karen stood in front of everyone, clipboard in hand, pretending to address maintenance concerns. But her voice carried venom. Certain residents have been leaving unsightly medical equipment outside. This isn't a care facility. It's a family community. All eyes turned to me. My face burned. Emily's cheeks went red. Her head bowed. She whispered, "Dad, let's just go." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at our front camera feed, wondering if Karen would try something again. Around midnight, I saw movement, a figure near our trash bins. I zoomed in. It was her, Karen, holding a flashlight, peering into our recyclables like she was searching for evidence. The next day, I confronted her. "If you step on my property again, I'll call the police," I warned. She smiled, that same fake stretched smile. "Oh, don't worry, Mr. Parker. I'm just keeping our neighborhood safe. You never know what kind of toxins people bring in." Toxins. The word echoed in my head long after she walked away. From that day forward, she started following us, at the park, at the grocery store, even when Emily went to her therapy center. She'd show up, pretending to check HOA, maintenance zones. But her eyes never left Emily. I began documenting everything. Photos, videos, logs of her visits. But deep down, I felt helpless. I couldn't move again. I just spent my savings getting this house, giving Emily the sense of stability she deserved. And Karen knew that. Then, one morning, a small plastic syringe was left on our porch. No note, no explanation. Just sitting there like a message. I reported it to the police, but without fingerprints or context, they said there wasn't much they could do. That was when my fear turned into resolve. I told myself, if she ever crossed the line again, I'd make sure everyone saw who she really was. And soon as she would. After the syringe on our porch, the atmosphere in our little cul-de-sac changed. It was like a storm that had been slowly gathering finally showed its teeth. Karen's quiet harassment became deliberate stalking. She stopped hiding behind HOA bylaws and started acting like someone who believed she could rewrite the rules herself. At first, she didn't need to be subtle. She would appear where Emily's therapy bus stopped, standing with her arms crossed as if she'd just happened to be out for a walk. She'd linger at the corner grocery store while I ran in for milk, then reappear at the crosswalk as if by accident. Her eyes would find Emily and hold, like a vulture deciding which part of the meal to take. Once, she followed us home all the way from the park and parked 3 houses down, her engine idling as she watched us through binoculars. It was unnerving, the kind of attention that made small children stop smiling. I started sleeping with the living room lights on and the front camera recording at all hours. I clipped every clip into a folder labeled Bethany. Footage showed her rifling through our mailbox, trespassing at dusk to take photographs of Emily's ramp, even leaving flyers with thinly veiled insults under our doormat. The neighbors who once smiled over garden fences now pretended not to notice. The HOA board, which had the power to stop her, shrugged and suggested mediation. Community tensions, they called it. That phrase felt like a poor bandage over a gaping wound. One night, while I was editing hours of footage, I noticed something in the background of a clip, a delivery van stopping at Karen's house. The timestamp showed it arrived just after midnight. I watched until the driver walked up to her porch, handed over a small unmarked package, and left. Karen took the box inside, and the door closed like a vignette in a horror film. What could she be ordering at that hour? I thought of the syringe on our porch, and my stomach clenched. Days later, I saw her at the pharmacy. She walked out with a plain brown bag clutched to her chest, moving like someone who had rehearsed a route. I thought about confronting her then and there, but something stopped me, a mingled fear and the awareness that public confrontation might only feed her fury. Instead, I took a photo from across the street and kept walking, my phone heavy in my palm. Her attacks escalated in ways that were psychological and petty, leaving medical-style warning labels on our door, anonymously reporting us to school services, telling therapists that my daughter's condition made our home unsafe, and in ways that felt like practice runs for something more sinister. She began calling my workplace with vague complaints. She showed up at city council meetings, talking about public health and community purity, phrases she repeated, so often she started to sound like a zealot quoting a doctrine she barely understood. The more I documented, the more apparent a pattern became. Her anger was not random. It had structure. It targeted the ways Emily moved through the world, the ramp, the wheelchair, the adaptive toys, the very things that made her life livable. I imagined her mind putting together a plan from that structure. The idea made my hands tremble when I held them. A turning point came when Emily was late coming back from school. She usually loved that bus ride. She'd chatter for 20 minutes about cartoons and cafeteria pizza. That day, the bus was slow. I called the school. "We've just been delayed," they said. "She'll be there any minute." When she finally arrived, her face was pale, and she seemed quieter than usual. She shrugged it off, blaming a headache, and wanted only to curl up on the couch with a blanket. I made soup and listened to the hum of the radiator like it was an accusation. That evening, I found a smear of something on the back wheel of her chair, subtle, like someone had tried to hide it. It was gone by morning, washed away by a neighbor's sprinklers, but the image stayed with me. I couldn't tell if it was dirt or something else, but the thought of someone touching my daughter's equipment without permission made bile rise in my throat. I told myself to be rational. I filed more reports, I showed video to the police, I went to the HOA again with my evidence. They suggested a meeting to resolve community concerns. They wanted everyone in a room, a neutral setting where words could calm tempers. I agreed, thinking perhaps naming the problem would shame Karen into stopping. The meeting was a theater of false courtesy. Karen sat like a general behind a neat stack of documents, her smile fixed and efficient. She read from a sheet about community welfare and neighborly responsibilities. When I presented my footage, the room murmured. Some neighbors shifted awkwardly. Others did that look people give when they don't want to be involved. Karen laughed softly and said, "I'm only doing what's best for the neighborhood." Her voice carried the confidence of someone convinced she had the moral high ground. It was after that meeting that things changed from harassment to threat. That week, an anonymous envelope arrived at our house with a single page, a printed list of rules we were supposedly violating, followed by a line that read, "Do better or someone will help you." There was no signature. There was no address. Just a cold, typed promise. I stopped answering the door without checking the camera. I taught Emily to always call me when she left the house and to never let anyone close if she felt uncomfortable. I asked our neighbors to watch, to be witnesses, to walk with us to the mailbox. Most agreed, but comfort is a scarce currency. Not everyone could carve out time to guard another family's safety. Throughout all this, Karen's presence felt like a weight. I could feel it at the edges of every day. She had resources, influence within the HOA, friends who nodded when she spoke, and the ability to cloak malice behind mission statements and bylaws. But the thing that scared me most was how methodical she had become. This wasn't a single act of rage, it was preparation. Still, I refused to believe she would actually harm Emily. There's a peculiar human optimism that surfaces when a parent is pushed to terror, a stubborn refusal to accept the worst even when evidence mounts. I clung to that hope while I fortified our home, while I learned to sleep with one ear open, while I taught Emily how to be extra careful. I wanted to believe the community would step up, that someone would see the pattern and stop her. But in the quiet hours watching the footage loop on my screen, I could almost see the outline of her plan. An escalation that began with humiliation, moved through intimidation, and could easily cross into violence. The thought of that curve tightened the air in my lungs. I made more calls, more reports, but almost no one took the trajectory seriously. Until the night, everything I feared took place on our front porch, under the weakest of lights, and changed our lives forever. That evening felt strangely quiet. The sun had dipped low behind the houses, painting the street in that faint orange glow that usually made our cul-de-sac look peaceful. Emily was humming softly, rolling down the driveway to check the mailbox like she always did after dinner. I was inside, washing dishes, the rhythmic sound of water hitting the sink, almost hypnotic. For once things felt calm. Then I heard the scream. It wasn't loud at first, just a sharp cry, the kind that makes every parent's heart stop. I dropped the dish and ran outside, and there she was, HOA Karen, standing beside my daughter's wheelchair with something glinting in her hand. For a moment, I couldn't process it. A syringe. She was actually holding a syringe. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, sprinting toward them. Karen didn't move. Her face was pale, her jaw clenched. "She touched my mailbox," she said in a trembling voice. She was spreading disease. Before I could reach them, she plunged the syringe into Emily's arm. My daughter gasped, her eyes rolling back as she slumped sideways, her wheelchair tipping to the ground. Time fractured. I remember the sound of her body hitting the pavement, the metallic clang of her chair, my heartbeat pounding louder than the world itself. I pushed Karen back and scooped Emily up, screaming her name over and over. Her lips trembled, her breath shallow. But then something shifted. Karen staggered backward. Her confident glare vanished. Her pupils widened, her breathing grew erratic. "What's happening?" she muttered, clutching her chest. Within seconds, she collapsed onto the pavement. Gasping for air, the syringe still clutched in her fist. Neighbors came running. Phones were out. Someone yelled, "Call 911." Another shouted, "Oh my God, she's poisoned." I knelt beside my daughter, cradling her limp body. "Stay with me, baby. Please stay with me," I whispered, tears streaking down my face. A neighbor named Mrs. Howard ran over with a towel and pressed it against Emily's arm. "It's swelling," she said. "We need to get her help now." I looked at Karen, lying on her back, her lips turning blue. She was trembling violently. The same poison she'd meant for my daughter was now attacking her own veins. The ambulance arrived within minutes, sirens slicing through the air. Paramedics rushed to both of them. 2 victims of injection, one said into the radio, possible toxin involved. As they loaded Emily onto a stretcher, her small hand fell limp from the side. I held it, refusing to let go even as they pushed me aside. The paramedics tried to revive Karen too, forcing oxygen into her lungs. When we reached the hospital, the chaos blurred together. Bright lights, nurses shouting codes, the smell of antiseptic and fear. They wheeled my daughter into the ER while another team dragged Karen into a different room. I stood there between them, the victim and the villain, both fighting for their lives. Hours crawled by. I sat outside the ICU, Emily's pink blanket wrapped around my shoulders. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every sound, every beep of the monitor, every announcement over the speaker felt like another blow to my chest. Finally, a doctor came out. "Mr. Parker," he said softly, "your daughter is stable for now. Whatever was in that syringe was toxic, but the dosage was low. We flushed most of it out. She's strong." I broke down right there, my knees giving out. Relief and rage collided inside me. "And the woman?" I asked. He hesitated. "She wasn't as lucky. Whatever she used, she contaminated herself too. She's in critical condition." As he spoke, a police officer approached. "Mr. Parker, we'll need your statement," he said. I nodded weakly. When I handed them the footage from my front camera, their faces changed. The video showed everything: Karen waiting in the shadows, syringe in hand, muttering to herself before she attacked Emily. Then, as she bent down, a drop of the liquid had splashed back into her open wound, a small cut on her palm. That was how her own poison had entered her bloodstream. It wasn't karma in theory, it was karma in physics. The story hit the local news within hours. HOA president attacks disabled child, poison backfires. The community exploded in shock. Neighbors who once ignored her behavior were suddenly vocal, swearing they never saw it coming. But as I sat beside my daughter's hospital bed, watching her small chest rise and fall under the soft glow of machines, I didn't feel vindicated. Just empty. She whispered, "Dad, why did she hate me so much?" I didn't know how to answer. All I could do was hold her hand and promise her the world would finally see who Karen truly was. And for the first time, I realized the poison wasn't just in the syringe. It had been in the way she saw others, in her hatred, in her soul. But now, that poison had found its way back home. The morning after the attack, the hospital hallways were packed with uniforms, reporters, and stunned residents from our neighborhood. The story had already spread across town. HOA president injects disabled child with poison, collapses moments later. Headlines buzzed on phones, TV vans lined the parking lot, and every time someone whispered Karen, heads turned. I hadn't slept a second. I sat beside Emily's bed all night, watching the slow, steady rise and fall of her chest. Her skin was pale, but her heartbeat was strong. I kept replaying everything: the look in Karen's eyes, the syringe, that horrifying moment she fell. None of it felt real. At 7 a.m., Detective Marlowe entered the room. Tall, steady, mid-40s with the weary calm of someone who'd seen too much. He offered a nod. "Mr. Parker, I'm leading the investigation into last night's assault. We've already secured your home's security footage. It's quite clear." "Clear?" I asked quietly. "You mean everyone's seen it?" He nodded. "Yes, sir. The video shows her waiting in your yard, syringe in hand, muttering before she attacks. Then, right as she injects your daughter, she wipes her forehead and accidentally drives the same needle into her own skin. That's what caused her collapse." So, it wasn't divine karma or poetic justice. It was literal physical truth. The same venom she intended for Emily had entered her bloodstream. What was in the syringe? I asked. Marlowe flipped open a small notebook. Preliminary tests show it was a mix of oleander extract and household cleaning chemicals, a crude toxin, but deadly enough in the wrong dose. We found more at her home. I stared at the floor. She planned it, didn't she? She did. We found printed pages in her study community health laws, chemical notes, even letters she drafted to the board about removing biohazards. That's what she called your daughter's wheelchair ramp. I felt my hands tremble. She called my little girl a biohazard? Marlowe's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry, sir. But yes." Outside the hospital, a storm was brewing. News channels replayed the footage nonstop. Protesters gathered near the HOA office, demanding Karen's resignation even though she was still in the ICU. People left flowers and get-well cards for Emily at our doorstep. For years, Karen had ruled the community through fear and technicalities, but overnight, her empire of control had crumbled. 2 days later, the hospital allowed me to take Emily home. She was fragile, but smiling again, her courage bigger than her pain. As I wheeled her into the car, flashes from cameras nearly blinded me. "Mr. Parker, is it true she planned it for weeks? Will you sue the HOA? Do you forgive her?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Back home, police tape still fluttered around the edge of our driveway. Forensic teams had taken samples from the pavement, gloves, and the remaining liquid from the syringe. Our neighborhood, once full of manicured lawns and perfect smiles, now looked guilty. Neighbors avoided eye contact. The same people who'd ignored Karen's cruelty were now desperate to distance themselves. That evening, Detective Marlowe returned with a flash drive. We finished cataloging her files. He said, "You might want to see this." On the screen were dozens of folders: rule, violations, medical codes, Parker family behavior. She'd been documenting us like a case study: photos, time stamps, even copies of Emily's therapy schedule. My stomach turned when I saw one labeled purification plan. Inside was a handwritten letter. It read, "This neighborhood deserves to be clean again. No more pity displays, no more sympathy projects. They bring disease, sorrow, weakness. I will fix it, and they will thank me later." I slammed the laptop shut. She was insane. Marlowe shook his head. "Not insane, Mr. Parker. Obsessed. She believed she was protecting something sacred, her version of perfection. And that's what makes people like her so dangerous." Later that night, the lab results arrived. Karen's fingerprints were all over the syringe, and her toxicology confirmed the same chemicals found in Emily's blood. Proof she'd poisoned both herself and my daughter. The next morning, the district attorney announced formal charges: attempted murder, possession of illegal toxins, and child endangerment. Since Karen was still hospitalized, the police kept her under guard. Days turned into weeks. Emily's health improved faster than expected. Her resilience amazed every doctor. She began drawing again, Pictures of flowers, wheelchairs with wings, and, strangely enough, one of a dark cloud turning into sunlight. "That's you and me, Dad," she said proudly. "The storm's gone now." But I couldn't rest. Not yet. When Karen finally regained consciousness, the detectives called me in. I stood behind the glass as they interviewed her. She looked pale, weak, the same woman who once controlled the entire HOA, now chained to a hospital bed. Her voice was hoarse. I didn't mean for her to die. I just wanted to teach them discipline, keep order. Detective Marlowe leaned forward. Order doesn't include poisoning a child. Her eyes flickered, and for a moment I saw something. Not guilt, but confusion, as if she still believed she was the hero of her own story. "I only wanted peace," she whispered. When the detective mentioned the word prison, she didn't flinch. Instead, she whispered something that chilled me to the bone. It was never about her, it was about me. I just didn't realize it until it was too late. As I left the observation room, the hallway lights reflected off the glass, making it look like I was walking away from a ghost. That night, I received a call from the HOA's vice president. They'd voted to remove Karen permanently and issue a public apology to our family. The same board that once ignored my warnings now wanted to rebuild trust. I hung up without answering. The next morning, I took Emily for a slow walk around the neighborhood. The same neighbors who'd once looked through us now waved. Nervously, some even apologized through teary eyes. Emily, in her innocent way, waved back to everyone. She didn't carry hatred, just hope. And as I watched her smile, something inside me settled. Karen's poison had taken many forms: fear, prejudice, arrogance. But it couldn't win against the simplest thing of all, kindness. Still, the case wasn't over. There was one more chapter, one that would play out under courtroom lights, where the truth, the footage, and the voices of the people Karen hurt would finally be heard. And that was where real justice would begin. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper, polished wood, and tension. Every step I took down that hallway echoed, like it was carrying the weight of months of pain. The sign outside the door read, "State of California versus Bethany Wilmore." But everyone in town knew it simply as the HOA Karen trial. Emily sat beside me in her wheelchair, dressed in a pale blue sweater and holding her stuffed bear. The same one she had the day of the attack. She looked calm, but I could feel her hand trembling under mine. This was the first time she'd seen Karen since that night. When they brought Karen in, gasps filled the courtroom. She looked almost unrecognizable, thinner, fragile, her once perfect hair now gray at the roots. Her left hand still shook slightly, a permanent reminder of the toxin that had nearly taken her life. But her eyes, they were the same. Cold, controlled, trying hard to pretend she was still the president of her perfect little world. The judge entered, and the bailiff called the room to order. Cameras weren't allowed inside. But that didn't matter. Reporters crowded every corner of the hallway outside. The world was watching. The prosecutor stood first, a young woman with fire in her voice. "Your Honor, this case isn't just about one act of violence," she began. "It's about months of harassment, obsession, and cruelty, culminating in an attack on a disabled child. The defendant, Bethany Wilmore, used her authority in the HOA to justify her hatred, but tonight, we prove that authority ends where humanity begins." Karen didn't look up once. When it was my turn to testify, I felt my throat tighten. The clerk asked me to swear in, and as I sat down, I could feel the entire courtroom's eyes on me. "Tell us, Mr. Parker," the prosecutor said, "what happened that day?" I took a deep breath. She waited outside my home. My daughter went to check the mail. Karen accused her of touching her mailbox, and then she injected her. There was a gasp from someone in the gallery. I continued, my voice cracking. Emily screamed once. Then she collapsed, and a moment later, so did Karen. The same syringe was in her hand. The prosecutor nodded. "And this footage," she pointed to the monitor, "is from your front camera?" "Yes," I whispered. They played the video. The room went silent. You could hear every breath, every word Karen muttered before the attack. And when the syringe hit her own palm, the sound of the audience's gasp was almost louder than the playback itself. When it ended, the judge's expression was stone. Karen's attorney, a thin man with slicked hair, tried to argue mental instability. My client was under severe psychological distress, he said. Years of community pressure, health problems, and isolation caused her judgment to collapse. But the prosecutor was ready. So, you're saying poisoning a child is the act of stress? She snapped. Not malice. He stammered. She wasn't thinking clearly. She was thinking clearly enough to research toxins, purchase syringes, and print letters about purifying her neighborhood. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Then came the moment no one expected. The judge asked Karen if she wanted to speak before the verdict was read. She stood slowly, gripping the edge of the table for balance. Your Honor, she began, her voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. I never hated the child. I couldn't stand watching the neighborhood decay. I gave everything to make it perfect, and when perfection slipped away, I thought I could fix it. I thought if I made an example, people would listen again. The prosecutor leaned forward. So, you admit you planned it? Karen's lips trembled. I planned to scare them, not kill. But when I saw her, she glanced toward Emily, I saw weakness. And I hated that weakness because I saw it in myself. The courtroom froze. She turned to face us. When the poison hit me, I felt it burn. I thought I was dying. And for a second, I saw her eyes, the same fear I had caused her. I knew it was over, not just for me, but for everything I thought mattered. Her voice cracked, the first real emotion she'd shown. I don't expect forgiveness, she said quietly. But I see now, hate poisons the one who carries it. Emily shifted beside me. Her small voice broke the silence. I forgive you. Everyone turned. Even the judge blinked in surprise. Karen's mouth fell open. For the first time, tears streamed down her face. Why? She whispered. Because, Emily said softly, I don't want your hate to live in me too. You could hear people sniffling across the courtroom. Even the stenographer paused for a second, wiping her eyes. The judge cleared his throat. That's enough, young lady, he said gently. Then, after a moment of silence, he delivered the verdict, guilty on all counts. As the guards led Karen away, she stopped and turned back one last time. Mr. Parker, she said quietly, thank you for protecting her. She's stronger than I ever was. For a fleeting second, I saw the smallest spark of regret in her eyes, not redemption but realization. When we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed us, shouting questions. But I didn't answer any. Emily was smiling faintly, the morning sun glinting off her wheelchair's handles like tiny halos of light. Justice had been served, not just by the law, but by truth. And as we drove home, I realized something profound. Sometimes the real punishment isn't prison. It's living long enough to see the reflection of the person you became. Weeks passed, and the dust finally began to settle. The story that once filled every headline slowly faded into background noise, replaced by newer scandals and tragedies. But for us, the echoes of that night never truly disappeared. They lived quietly in the corners of our home, in the creak of the wheelchair ramp, in the cautious way Emily looked over her shoulder whenever someone new approached. Still, she healed, not just physically but emotionally. The doctors called her recovery miraculous. Her body had flushed out most of the toxins, and the swelling faded quicker than anyone expected. She began laughing again, sketching again, returning to that bright spirit she'd always had. But there was a deeper strength in her now, a kind of quiet wisdom that even adults couldn't fake. Every morning before school, she'd stop at the door, turn to me and say, "You're watching, right?" It wasn't fear anymore, it was trust. Trust that I'd always be there, that she could still believe in safety, in people, in the idea that good wins eventually. The neighborhood, too, had changed. The HOA disbanded temporarily while the city investigated its mismanagement. For the first time, people started talking to one another, not about property lines or fence colors, but about what they'd allowed to happen. Neighbors who once stayed silent knocked on our door with apologies, casseroles, and shaking voices. We should have stopped her, one woman said, tears welling up. We saw how she treated you. We just didn't want to get involved. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to forgive them. Part of me wanted to scream. But Emily, she just smiled and said, "It's okay. You're helping now." Soon, the story began to inspire something unexpected. Parents from nearby towns reached out, sharing similar experiences: disabled kids bullied, families isolated by HOA rules, or by people like Karen who used authority as armor. One mother messaged me, saying, "Your story gave me the courage to file a complaint against my HOA. Thank you." That's when I realized what Emily had unknowingly started: a movement. We decided to turn our pain into purpose. Together, we launched a small community group called Ramp Rights, advocating for inclusion, accessibility, and compassion in neighborhood associations across the state. It started small: a few volunteers, a website, a hotline for families facing discrimination. But within months, it grew faster than I imagined. News stations invited us for interviews, and Emily, my 12-year-old miracle, sat there on live TV, calmly explaining why kindness should never have to be legislated. And she said something that silenced the room. Sometimes, people hurt others because they think power makes them strong. But real strength is helping someone stand when the world keeps knocking them down. Even the anchor choked up. Meanwhile, Karen remained in prison. Her health deteriorated. But the letters started arriving, one then another, each with shaky handwriting. She never begged for forgiveness. Instead, she wrote about her regrets. She said she'd begun teaching literacy classes to inmates, helping others read and write letters home. In one, she wrote, "I see her eyes every night, not in anger but in forgiveness. It hurts, but it heals too. Maybe this is how redemption works." I never replied. Not because I hated her, but because I didn't know what to say. Some wounds don't close with words, they close with time. A year later, the city installed a new park bench in the neighborhood, one with a small bronze plaque that read, "For every child who is made to feel different, you belong here." Emily designed it herself. On the day of the ceremony, dozens of families gathered. The air was warm, the sun gentle. Kids ran across the grass, some with wheelchairs, some with braces, some running free. It was the kind of day that felt like a beginning, not an ending. As we cut the ribbon, Emily whispered, "She didn't win, did she, Dad?" I smiled through tears. "No, sweetheart. Hate never wins, not when love fights back." She grinned. "Good, because we've got more people to help." The crowd applauded as she spoke into the microphone, her small voice confident and clear. "This park isn't just for me. It's for every kid who's ever been told they didn't fit in. Don't listen to them, you do." The applause turned into cheers. For once, the same neighborhood that had once turned its back now stood united, not out of guilt, but out of growth. That night, when the lights dimmed and the laughter faded, I sat by the window, watching the stars. I thought about how easily darkness had entered our lives, how fast it had spread, and how light, though slower, always found its way back. Justice wasn't just in Karen's conviction. It was in the way my daughter smiled again, in the neighbors who now checked on one another, in the way forgiveness had transformed hate into change. Sometimes, redemption doesn't mean erasing what's been done. It means learning from it, carrying it, and using it to build something better. And as Emily fell asleep that night, clutching her bear under the soft glow of her bedside lamp, I whispered the same words I'd told her since she was a baby. "You are loved, you are strong, and you are safe." For the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. If this story moved you, if you believe no child should ever suffer because of someone else's hatred, then don't let it end here. Share this story so more people understand how dangerous silence can be. Tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? And have you ever seen injustice like this in your neighborhood? Your voice matters more than you think. It might be the reason someone finds the courage to speak up. And if you believe kindness is stronger than hate, if you believe love always finds a way to win, then take 1 second right now. Hit that subscribe button and join this community that stands for justice, empathy, and hope. Because stories like this aren't just meant to be watched, they're meant to wake hearts up. Let's make sure no one like Emily ever feels alone again.